I know we've had a couple of days to think about this, but we're here to think about it some more and talk about it. Hi, Andrew Mason.
Hi, Cecil, lammey. As Winnie the Pooh might say, think, think, think.
Now you're making me hungry for honey. At least I can talk today, huh? I didn't lose my voice yelling at the Broncos.
Was there some honey along with your tea that helped you make it through and restore the powers of your voice? Because when I went and listened to your post-game show, I thought, Cecil's almost all the way back here. You're doing an hour and 14 minutes, an angry hour and 14 minutes, and your voice had a lot of juice to it. And I say juice because look at the guy on the screen. Vance Joseph, back in 2017, remember he was talking about getting guys with juice. Unfortunately, the search for juice that year yielded Carlos Henderson and Isaiah McKenzie. McKenzie had a pretty solid career. Carlos Henderson best remembered for a traffic stop where he shoved weed in his mouth.
There you go. The juice, it's kind of gone with this Broncos defense. I don't want to say the defense is broken. Certainly they've set a sack record now, 58 sacks as a team. That is the record for a single season with this team. But Vance Joseph fixing this defense. You've got the numbers, Mace, your numbers piece, a star every single week at denversports.com. Let's get into it and how they turn this thing around.
How they turn this thing around. Well, I think, but let's start with the what kind of before we get into the how. The how involves masking deficiencies, and that's sort of the name of the game in the NFL. No team is perfect. No roster is perfect. How long can you mask the issues that you have roster-wise? And the Broncos did a pretty good job of that for most of the year defensively, and Vance Joseph did an exquisite job of that, and that's why by the end of November, you were talking about this defense league-wide ranking third in total defense. In December, in total defense, dead last.
Oh,
32nd. They were 31st last week. Now they're 32nd.
Oh, boy.
Worst defense in total defense ranking in the league, 32nd. Worst defense in yards per play allowed after being third in the league in the first 3 months of the season. Worst defense against the pass in terms of passing yards per game allowed. They were 9th in the first 3 months of the season. Now they sit 32nd in the league. Advanced metrics a little bit kinder. For example, the Broncos, they're 18th in defensive EPA per drop back. They were 2nd in the first 3 months. They're 23rd this month in drop back success rate. They were 3rd. So not the worst in those, but some of those things with the yardage, it's because they're giving up a lot of big chunks.
Right.
So you see, like, for example, sacks kind of come into play in helping you in the success rate when you have 7 sacks like you did of Joe Burrow. And wasn't that kind of the most Joe Burrow game? Because he's had some games where he's been brought down a ton and he's still effective. You think back to that Titans playoff game when the Bengals were en route to the Super Bowl 3 years ago. That's the sort of thing that happens. Give Joe Burrow credit for being able to shake off sometimes a heavy pass rush and being able to still make plays. But this game, Sean Payton did talk about it today about, pointing to how tough the Bengals are through the air. And there's no doubt they are. It's probably the most dynamic passing game in the league, certainly with the 3 receivers that they have, plus Mike Gesicki. But I think Mike Gesicki is sort of a canary in the coal mine here that reveals the thing that maybe the Broncos aren't going to be able to fix. Gesicki feasting underneath.
Yes, once again.
And inside linebackers. We did see a little bit more of Drew Sanders in this game. It may be reaching a point where you say, let's just give Drew Sanders a look because you're not getting the results you want from Justin Strnad, for example, who continues to struggle as he has throughout the month.
I'm okay with that, Mace. And before we go further into that, just a simple pondering, if you will, because you and I watch a lot of football. And last year when they made that run, it's like, okay, this is not repeatable, what they were doing. But the way they were playing defense earlier, that is repeatable. And it's like Riley Moss is a big-time player, and missing him hurts. Getting him back, he was rusty. We'll get into that. But to have this sort of fall in this manner, not to say that the ball doesn't bounce differently or anything can't happen. It is the NFL. It's any given Sunday. But I wasn't predicting that from a top defensive unit to worst in the league in a month. You know, that's a pretty far fall, and something for me is unexpected.
Yeah, and I think the other thing on Riley Moss in particular is, I mean, you and I kind of were warning about this last week that Riley Moss wasn't necessarily going to be a tonic that fixed the entire defense.
Right.
That it would help having him out there, and maybe you could do some more things pass rush wise because of them. And I think that bore itself out in the 7 sacks that you got, that you can trust him more in man coverage. We did see PS2 against Jamar Chase most of the game, and that worked reasonably well. But with Riley Moss, I think it's not a question of whether he's good enough. I think it's a question of whether he's healthy enough. And I don't think it's coincidence that we're sitting here talking about the kind of game that he had where he gave up 2 touchdowns and he gave up 11 receptions for 128 yards per the Pro Football Focus data. We're having that conversation partially because PS2 was so good, but partially because Riley Moss isn't all the way there. He's trying to grind through it a little bit as he comes off that MCL injury, and there's only so much you can do, and we'll get into it as the week goes on. But curious to see just how many key players the Chiefs sit down, because do they decide to maybe rest the quarterback but still go heavy at wide receiver, especially as they're trying to kind of work Hollywood Brown back in there. They're trying to learn more about Xavier Worthy. There could be some challenges in this game as well, even though you're going to face a Chiefs team that will probably not have Mahomes and Kelsey. And then on the defensive side, McDuffie and Chris Jones, I would expect wouldn't play either.
I'll check the health status, but Noah Gray could be a problem for this team. And Carson Wentz could be their Drew Lock. Drew Lock, I've talked to some people around the league, let's say, Mace. Giants aren't happy Drew Lock won that game. They're not happy. But Lock went out there and said, F you, I'm going to, do what I do. Carson Wentz may say that, and it's not like the Chiefs don't want to win, but if they don't win, Cincinnati does not get in.
The guys they are putting out there will play to win the game.
Yes.
To quote Herman Edwards.
It's like college
football.
Is
the thing. Okay. If the players don't tank.
No.
And the coaches don't tank.
No.
Now, do we sometimes see decisions made where players are shut down? Whether it's a case like the Chiefs where you're going to rest up for the playoffs, or some other cases where we say, okay, we don't really want to risk you in this game. We don't want to risk something bad. Like, I think, could you see, for example, maybe Cleveland saying to Myles Garrett, you've done enough. We don't want to risk you, especially if you might be traded, and messing that potential value up in the offseason. I mean, those things happen, but the players who are out there and the coaches are on the sideline, they're all going balls to the wall to win the game. And those that are out there for the Chiefs will go all out to win the game.
Yes.
You have to expect that.
Yep.
Now, should the Broncos at home be good enough to beat a Chiefs team that does not have, again, in all likelihood, because Andy Reid, every time he's clinched the seed he's locked into the seed going into the last week in Kansas City. Every time he's done that, he's rested his starters. But it doesn't mean the Chiefs can't win. Hey, the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes making his first career start back in 2017 and playing Kareem Hunt for one series to get him the rushing title and then sitting him, that Chiefs team came in and beat the Broncos, but that was a bad Bronco team. Another interesting example is back in 2013, the Chiefs were locked into their playoff seeding in the wild card, so they started Chase Daniel at San Diego. San Diego playing to make the playoffs. The Chiefs trying to get healthy, benching some key starters as they went into that game. And what happened in that game, I mean, again, an example from 11 years ago, it took overtime for the Chargers to get playing at full strength to get it done against a Chiefs team that was just trying to reset things for the playoffs. So there it is right there. That's a very similar scenario to what the Broncos have and maybe very similar, very similar in terms of the overall skill sets of the teams. And the game went overtime. So do not act like this is a walkover. It's not. The Broncos have to go and take care of business. And oh my goodness, Cease, if they don't, there are going to be some really, really hard conversations and some really pointed things said. And to be frank, they would all be justified.
Well, and I won't get ahead of us, but I mean, the scapegoat in that case would be Vance Joseph. It would be.
But Sean Payton would bear some responsibility, and we'll get into Sean Payton and the offense on Tuesday's show.
That's on Tuesday's show, yeah.
Yes. But Sean Payton would not escape culpability in that either. But I do agree. Like if this team loses, and especially if the defense keeps leaking points and yards, would not surprise me at all if Vance Joseph becomes a scapegoat. Because that's just how these things work.
Well, let's hope they win and they get in and all that kind of good stuff. You were in the locker room after the game. Let's start with the Riley Moss conversation here. Yeah. Continue that. We know that young man. He's so mentally strong, even after a crap sandwich game. Got to clean it up. But even after a crap sandwich game, it's my belief, Mace, that Moss will be okay mentally because he has been before, not in this type of bad game, but when he's given up bad plays, it doesn't stick with him. You're in that locker room after the game. Give me the mood. Give me the Moss conversation, the crap sandwich, and we'll play the clip.
I don't worry about Riley Moss up here. I don't worry about Riley Moss here. Where I worry is just what he can do mobility-wise with coming off the MCL. But he's smart enough, and he's tough enough, and he's tenacious enough, and he's resilient enough. He has the short memory that a corner needs to have in this league to succeed. And it's a little thing, but standing there in a depressing locker room after the game answering questions, that's another manifestation of what kind of timber that young man is cut from. And look, he's got a tough job. When you play opposite Pat Surtain II, you are going to be in the line of fire.
Yep.
And certainly he was. The Bengals decided we are going, Joe Burrow, Zach Taylor said, we are going at Riley Moss. 15 times he was targeted, Cease, in that game. The most he'd been targeted before last week was 9 times. 9 times? 9 times. Yes, 9 times he was targeted when the Broncos played New Orleans, I should say, back in October. But yeah, 9 times targeted or in that game and 15 times targeted against the Bengals for 11 catches, 128 yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, it was a rough game. Absolutely a rough game.
Yeah, absolutely brutal for Riley Moss, but he talked after the game about putting out the fire. Here's what Moss had to say.
We were out there a little bit, and we got to be able to put the fire out when something goes bad. That's what great defenses do is they figure out a way to get off the field, and we gotta dial it in.
A lot of third downs.
Yep.
I mean, you got a little bit of a helping hand with the aggressiveness on 4th downs. And by the way, when you saw that field goal smash into the left upright, I think you understood why Zach Taylor was aggressive going for it on 4th downs in the first half. I was having that conversation with somebody earlier this afternoon, how, the Broncos had Will Lutz. They had 4th and 2 early, and they took the points. And it came up because Green Bay had 4th and 2 in the second quarter on Sunday and chose not to. I am, I'm in favor in general of aggression, but to me, you make those decisions to go for it kind of later on in the game when you know what exactly you need. When you're in the first half and you're in expository action, to me, it's get points. Get points how you can. And it is fair to wonder how the game would have flowed if the Bengals were healthy at kicker, if they had McPherson available. Right. And because I think they probably would have kicked a couple of times and they would have had 6 more points on the board. And the game flows in a completely different manner from there. So, but they didn't. But still, the Broncos, 3rd downs, generally speaking, couldn't get off the field. Bengals extending drives. I mean, for all that we can, dive into about, maybe finding some silver linings defensively. And certainly the silver linings exist in the pass rush and the fact that you were able to get Joe Burrow down 7 times. And Zach Allen had a game that would probably get him AFC Defensive Player of the Week honors if he played for a winning team. I think he should still get it for the game that he had from the interior defensive line. Maybe one of the best games from an interior defensive lineman I've ever seen in all my years covering the Broncos. Maybe the best. But sometimes it's a bottom line thing. It's a simple bottom line thing. You did not force a punt. No 3 and outs, no punts until overtime. And that will get more into the decision to not go for 2. That was something that I thought of as the Broncos are weighing whether to kick or go for 2 is, man, you've gotten a turnover. You've gotten off the field on 4th downs, but you've barely slowed them down. You haven't stopped them cold to that point. And then, of course, they get the stop early in overtime, but they can't do anything with it because the offense goes 3 and out.
We got a lot to say about Sean's decision not to go for 2. That's on Tuesday's show.
Man,
but again, you were in the locker room, and Pat Surtain seemed very confident in a bounce back. You want me to play it, or do you want me to set it up here about Pat Surtain?
Play it.
I'm very confident. I think we've got a great bunch, a great group of, men on this team that's resilient, that's eager. I mean, obviously the agony of defeat is not a good feeling. We just need to focus on next week, making sure we secure this victory because that's what counts, getting ourselves in this tournament, establishing ourselves in this tournament, and see where it goes from there.
I mean, it's not the way you want to get in, but who cares about how you want to get in? It's about getting in.
Yeah.
And the best part of it is once you get in, the whole thing resets. The only way your record matters is in determining who and where you play. But that's it. I mean, yeah, you're going to have to go to Buffalo if you're in the playoffs. Can't really think of a worse spot to go.
Okay, but
nothing. No, and I don't mean that in terms of the city. I like Buffalo, the city. It's just trying to go through the logistics here of a potential trip to Buffalo. It's getting a little dicey. And also, have you seen some of the advanced computer models on the weather early to make January?
No.
If the Broncos go to the playoffs, be prepared for a brutally cold day.
Okay.
Like single digits, wind chill, diving that figure lower with the wind blowing off of Lake Erie, possible lake effect snow, all the things that you get in Buffalo. And the worry is that if you get into a game like that, you fall behind early, that you stop thinking about winning and you start thinking about survival. And I mean like human survival, as in I have to get inside because this is awful.
Yeah.
It becomes it adds another layer. Like if you've got uber frigid conditions, if you fall a little bit behind early, there are instincts that kick in that you can't control. We saw some of them when Miami went to Kansas City last January, that they capitulated. And that's something that's actually pretty common from games in extreme cold. You sometimes see that kind of capitulation from a team that gets in a hole early.
Yep. But bounce back, control it. And the one nice thing, Mace, before we wrap up today's show, and it's a Troutman quote, but I'll use it here as we talk about defense. You can't lose twice.
Yeah.
And this team's had some heartbreaking losses. They've had some heartbreak in the Kansas City loss or an embarrassing loss like the Ravens loss. And they know, and they've mentally adjusted of like, we can't lose twice. So it's going to sting. I'm sure yesterday on Sunday, it was terrible for this team. But Monday is a different day. Tuesday is a different day.
Mm-hmm.
No partying on New Year's. We're going, man. Like, I think this team will bounce back. So I agree with what Surtain said.
New Year's Day is going to be a normal Wednesday.
It's just a day.
As I mentioned in an email to you last night or this morning, like we
got a lot to do. We got a lot to do.
We're going to be out there, right? I mean, it's It's not a holiday for me. It's not a holiday for the Broncos. Like having this is going to keep the New Year's revelry down. And that's okay. If you want to celebrate, make the playoffs, but even then, don't celebrate for long. I mean, you might have to turn around and go to Buffalo the following Saturday. Like my guess is if they get in the playoffs, it's going to be a Sunday game. In fact, I would actually go sit there and say it'd be the early game on Sunday.
Yeah, because it's Buffalo marquee. They want to, have that on Sunday.
That feels like a CBS Sunday game,
Sure.
11 a.m. Mountain Time, 1 p.m. Eastern, leading off the triple header.
For
Could
us,
be wrong.
logistically, I hope it is. For travel purposes, because both Mason and I will be there. So yeah,
If they're in,
we'll be there for you.
that's just my guess. That's just my guess is if the Broncos are in the playoffs, 1 p.m. Eastern time on Sunday in Buffalo, but we'll see. Could be Saturday. Saturday would stink. Won't be. The one thing we know is it won't be Monday because the league wants that the 4-5 games, so they know who's got the home games the following weekend. I would even venture to say the league might be salivating at the notion of a 4-5 Monday night game between the Detroit, Minnesota loser with a gaudy record, going down to probably Tampa Bay. And if it's Detroit going to Tampa Bay, they've already lost to them this year. They played a 1-point game in the playoffs last year. If it's Minnesota going to Tampa Bay, I see no reason why the Bucs can't win that game. They're good enough to beat Detroit. I think they're good enough to beat Minnesota.
Yep.
That'll be pretty delicious, I think, if you get that. I think the league's probably rooting for the Bucs to get this thing done and provide a game where you might have a truly great team going down there and being in jeopardy of losing in the first round.
As Ice-T would say, delicious.
Yes. But on the AFC side, I mean, if the Broncos can get in and they can get some early momentum. By the way, I did kind of like the decision to when they won the coin toss to take the ball, and it almost worked brilliantly. It got him 3 points, got him ahead, but it almost worked for a touchdown. They were moving the ball pretty effectively on that series. I just didn't like the fade route call coming out of the timeout from the 12-yard line. I don't mind a fade route at the 2 or the 3. I don't like the fade from that far away.
Yeah, it's different angles.
Especially when you need 2 yards to move the chains and get goal to go.
Yep.
In fact, I actually in the press box, I turned to my neighbors and I said, RPO.
Would have been nice.
RPO with bolles. What play caller Mace would have gone with. That's just me.
Well, play caller Mace. We're going to wrap up today's show on Tuesday. We are talking Sean Payton. Why didn't you go for 2? Why is he calling timeouts? Like, where's the game management? In game Sean Payton? I don't have questions about Sean Payton Monday through Saturday, except the game was Saturday. Sunday, Sean Payton, what are you doing, Hans? What are you doing? So we'll get to that, Mace. Let's wrap this thing up. How do folks help us out here on our YouTube channel?
Like,
comment,
share,
subscribe,
hit that notification bell
so that you
never miss vid.
That's right. He's Andrew Mason. You follow him on all the socials at Mace Denver. I'm at Cecil Lammey saying OBT's BFD. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned and stay frosty.